So what is it that you look for? Like in the piece, you look for things, obviously, I guess you look for things that are individually, might be difficult for you technically. Yeah. Is that the first thing you look for?
Well, I mean, we have a series all through January, sometimes February, called Horizons, which is part of. And so we have, 6 maybe contents, an hour long. And I don't know about you guys, but the first thing, we're not necessarily a contemporary specialist orchestra. Right. So the first thing I look for is, I actually go to the library in advance, in case there are some extended techniques, right, or I have to go look up multiphonic fingering, yeah, or something. That's my first fear.
Right. Is that the big things that
are specific?
Yeah, there are specific things.
Because we're not doing them on Friday night in the
Yeah. And different composers have different way of writing the same thing.
Yes.
So sometimes it's a case of identifying exactly what they mean.
Yes.
And going, oh, actually, it's just this, and it's fine now.
Because I've had issues. I always have issues with accidentals. Yeah. I get smacked around the head by one guy for writing it this way, and then that's, oh, you like old sharps? Yes, and then one of them go, oh, flats, it's like so. So I understand what you're saying with that one. I mean, I do try and that for me is always an issue. I always think about how to write something so that it will be immediately or pretty clear anyway in terms of how it looks. So would you be the same when you look for, like, particularly for the double bass?
Harmonic express can be a problem, right, because some composers can write them at pitch or as we transpose an instrument. Yeah. It can be at a different pitch, so working that out, whether they are actually natural harmonics or you've got to fake them with fourth, third or fifth.
So would you, let me ask you this question now, if you see somebody who writes in the wrong way,
right? Yeah.
Do you think?
Well, the one thing
because I probably.
Bear in mind there's a camera.
No, we're not mentioning names, so you're allowed to say.
No, I just think it's happened in big composers like Benjamin Britten, writing in the tenor clef below the C. There's actually no point in doing that. That actually makes the piece then harder. And then sort of even the typeset sometimes can make it difficult. Yeah. We were doing last week. We were doing Bruckner 5, right, where its typeset was old. And it actually, the bits that you had to play in that weren't particularly hard. It was actually the physical reading of that.
Yes.
So if it is, generally in modern music, you'll have, different time signatures, 5s, 4s, whatever, it has to be absolutely straight away readable. Yeah. That's the most important thing. So that, if it is going to be difficult, then you've got no qualms about saying, well, I can read it, now it's up to me to work it out.
Right.
And if you can do that, there's no problem.
Right.
If then, if the typeset is wrong, and sometimes you see, when it's been done on Sibelius or something like that the scan of the bar doesn't fit.
Yeah.
So if you've got a bar of just say, I don't know, say it's in 3/4, and you've got a dotted minute, right? That might be, this short. And then the next bar is exactly the same length as this long. So then in your mind, when you're flying around trying to, it's really awkward.
Yes.
So that just simple things like that, as you say, taking out the music beforehand, that can actually, you're even having to put a mental map of the note of what's going on, so that when you come along to that, you think, oh, I'm not going to jump in early, or I'm in late, So those sort of things I think are really important.
Yeah.
For us, as viola players, we obviously play alto clef and treble clef.
Yes.
And we have found in the past that composers have just left it in alto clef and then written it in 56 ledger lines of the stave, and you're actually writing in note length. We actually took something back to somebody who's younger than us, and they rewrote it for us.
Yeah.
Because we were reading really complicated rhythm on the stave.
Yes.
But the notes were about 3 inches above.
Okay.
So you couldn't read that and that down there at the same time, and we were just sitting like a...
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And that's
just... have a look at my manner ball in the alto clef. Tell you right now, but I don't think I am quite careful about
anything that goes sort of
nosebleed register.
E or F above the stave in alto clef, anything that stays consistently up there is great.
Yeah.
It's like anything that's on the stave in alto clef.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have composers who've written for us in treble clef.
Yes.
I mean, maybe they don't understand, but they've then written below the stave in treble clef, which we don't read either.
Yes.
We would read down to a middle C in treble clef. Anything below that would be an alto clef.
I mean, in fairness, that's basically confidence, isn't it?
Well, as I say, Benjamin Britten,
I mean,
Yeah,
it is.
yes, yeah.
You know, quite honestly, I have to say for myself, I'm having, making myself a hostage for 40 years since I could very well be hoisting my own
You're very
brave. Very brave, yeah.
But I think it's interesting that you want to know these things.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be any shame in saying, oh, right, I've done it that way, especially these days with things like space or whatever. You can change them quickly.
Yes, you can.
You can change them, and that this sort of, writing in different clefs, it should be making it easier, not harder.
Yeah.
So, it's hard for us to go up to a certain amount, finding the bass clef, and, I think these days, modern music and bass especially, we'd rather have a treble clef than tenor clef. It's a bit of a...
Really?
Yeah.
That's
I think tenor clef's not really that useful, I don't think, these days.
From my perspective, it's quite difficult as well for composers to know whether or not how to broach the subject. When something is either out of range or for wind parts quite often. First of all, they don't let you know that it's going to be a solo, which would be great to know because you don't know the work at all.
Yes.
It just would be helpful. But they also, in the orchestral parts, and I can understand completely how a composer wouldn't necessarily know how it works in each orchestra. But if they can find out in advance who is the doubling player, who plays the alto, who plays the piccolo, because very often they put the highest part in the piccolo, on the flute, which should actually be in the first 11 thing, or the alto solo in the piccolo's part, quick thing they do everything. That kind of thing would be really helpful. And
So
sometimes from our perspective, we think a composer are going to take offence if you bring that up.
A lot of the times it would go through the conductor. You could go to the conductor and say, look, this doesn't really work.
Yeah.
Could we see if there's another way round, or can we do something else? And quite often the conductor would speak to the composer and you'd sort of be an intermediary.
Right.
So you didn't go to the composer and say, it's a bit more professional that way. I mean, I've done things that way before. We've gone, this is really, really hard. Is there anything we can do just to
make it more
even on articulation and something, sometimes people write very specific articulations and we're leaping all over the place. And actually we'd be much better off with less articulation. And because you're just going, well, I can concentrate on so many things, but you've just added one too many. Especially, maybe not the same for the flute. If you're on your own, it's one thing, but if you've got a section of 12, everybody's got to do the same thing. And when it gets hugely complicated, that's when the problems start. Because it'll take one person to do it wrong.
And I think following on from that as well is if you've got so many things you have to work on, heads can go down quite quickly then. And people go, I can't be bothered.
I know.
And it's this that sort of attitude, and that helps no one.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I teach composition in the jazz world with my school, and I always say to them, the last thing you want to do is to really piss off the players, because because already you're already further away from what you want with the music. And the one thing you want is for them to be sympathetic before you. And the last thing, and I said, even a small thing, they can kind of, if they're a bit tired already, they're already ready to be tired. I'm not talking about the orchestra, I'm just about any musician. Any musician. So for you, on your, we're here on this putative day with the downbeat conductor. Are you just looking at, are you trying to get a sense of what else is going on while you're reading this, or is it just maybe in your section, or do you try and hear maybe, that's a cue, and I hear the timpani doing that?
On the very first time through, I think, I speak for myself, you've got blinkers on,
Yeah,
and you are going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and you are doing your line, and you are ignoring everybody else, and you're going with the beat.
Yeah.
Depending on the level of difficulty.
I mean, obviously, but it's hugely complicated rhythms and things. You know where the beat is, and you just play your part where it's supposed to be. Because the thing is, on the very first run through, is people might be making mistakes as well. So if you're listening to somebody and you're trying to adapt to everything else that's going on, it would be a mistake. That's why you have the conductor, so that if there is no compromise, that's the downbeat. You can't interpret it. That's it.
It becomes very technical. He has presumably spent quite a lot of time, or she, maybe one of them, spent quite a lot of time analysing the score and working out which bars he might subdivide into 18 or whatever to make it easier for the different things that are happening. And usually if they're intelligent, and they often are, it's really helpful. They'll go through all that possibly in advance, or they'll stop at certain stages and say, this next section is good. And if they don't do that, there will be a lot of time wasted.
Yes.
And a lot of times, well, they've worked out who works with who, right? Violas, you're with the clarinets and the horns, cellos with the basses, and so you have at least some idea. And also, contrary, they go, don't worry, none of you are supposed to be playing at the same time.
Right, yeah.
Which in some ways is actually easier.
Yes, I know. You're not responsibility to anybody else.
Yeah, so...
And from another point, okay, so another point, let me ask a more general question. If you're getting a piece of new music, there's two questions. What do you hate to see or be presented with, and what do you really like to be presented with? You know, in a general sense, I'm not saying, you know, I hate them. I mean, you know, in a more general thing, new music, I hate it when they are, you know, it's really great when you get them, and it's this.
A lot is down to the editing and where the music is on the page. I mean, you've had stuff where you've had loads of rests in the middle of the page, and you get to the bottom, and it's something really important, and you have to do a page turn.
Yes.
And just silly things like that. It's always much easier, no matter how difficult the music is, if it's laid out properly. So that you have your bars rest, or if you don't have bars rest, you have your 3 pages that turn out and origami them back together. So for me, the initial thing is actually physically being able to turn the pages, being able to read it.
Yeah. I think as well, it's, you know, especially on a double bass big instrument, you know, so almost thinking of that sort of Einstein thing of standing on the shoulders of giants. You know, looking back, seeing, you know, look at Beethoven, look at Brahms, look at these, you know, look at Schnittke, these sort of people, see how they have done that bass part, because things are possible and impossible in certain instruments. And you know, there's nothing more satisfying. Say you play like a Strauss piece, it's blooming hard, but it's playable. You know, and there's so much, you know, enjoyment of playing something difficult, but you know that you can play it. Rather than playing something going, mother really.
I know.
Do you know what I mean? And
I mean, I even know that as a bass player, because I'm a bass player. I even know that myself when piano players write bass parts. They often sound great on the piano, but they're ugly on the instrument. They're physically ugly, but they sound good. They just sound good. But that's even stuff that's playable, but it just doesn't sit well.
Yeah, see, like if you listen to pop songs, you get sampled guitars. It doesn't sound like a guitar.
In flute writing, we often get violin writing. And basically the flute, although we have all these keys, it's still a harmonic series-based instrument. They're still overblowing each octave. And a lot of the extra things we put down are just for intonation, they're not actually producing that higher note. You're doing it all for them, and when they want you to. In fact, we've just been playing Wagner, and he did it, so... you were saying, they expect you to be able to overblow these fifths and octaves within...
But then again, it's like Strauss, I mean, towards the end of his life, he used to go into rehearsals and be horrified. These people could play his parts, and he'd be going, no, it was only, I had to write it properly, because it had to make, you know, harmonic sense. It doesn't matter, just get there, you know. He used to be horrified about it.
Like you said, it's nice to be challenged.
It is
incredibly rewarding when you make the process over here. That's how we do find it rewarding sometimes to be challenged. So that's something that you really have to work at, and when you achieve it, it's incredibly good.
But one of the things, going back to your original question, is when you get to part and you're in 4/4, and then you can divide it into minims, into triplet minims, and then within that there's a 5, and within that group there's a 6, and you've got one semiclave somewhere in the middle of all this subdivision, and you sit there looking at the bar going, I'm really sorry, I have no idea what that is.
I can tell you right now, you will get nothing out of me. Absolutely, I get nothing out of
There's sometimes, you know, you get to the concert, and all you have is this big pencil mark like this, and you play just after that one, because you physically, my brain doesn't do maths like that. Astrophysics.
I think from the point of view of a composer, I think that's almost self-defeating to do that. I mean, not almost, but unless you're famous enough where this is going to become a piece that's played 200 times and people just get used to it. I'm sure the writers spring the first time they saw it. They've been saying, "What? This guy's out of his mind." You know, that this can need to be played.
The last page of the bass part, somebody actually tried to rewrite it in 4/4.
All right.
And then it actually makes it more. But with that, like you just learn it, and it's I just meant to be a dance. You just dance it.
You don't really know, at least from our class, you don't usually know until you do it. And then sometimes you go, actually, that's brilliant. You look at it on the page and it's very difficult. Especially with the other part for any music, you just go, but you know, you sit down and suddenly, especially the jazzy ones, where suddenly it all fits together really nicely. You just go, oh, that's really cool. I really like that. You know.
I did a piece this year, earlier this year. I was for a flute player at Manuel. There was a piece by Dalbati, and I was working in Cardiff doing it, and so I wanted to get get to know. So I Googled it, and it basically, this Dalbadi basically said that this is, I want to write it in the French tradition. I wanted to look back to the famous, and I thought, oh, this sounds good, so I downloaded it, listened to it, and it was absolutely superb. It's really amazing. I mean, very modern, but then every bit, a bit of Debussy, Ravel, Cooper, and all this sort of stuff. And this had lots of extended harmonics and all that sort of stuff. Some parts, it was like 3 different harmonics going at the same time. The parts didn't actually work, we had to switch them around. But it was such a good piece, and the soloist was just and it was just, you just did anything to get it right. It was a great piece. Okay, look, there were mistakes in it because it didn't work, so the second bass part couldn't get down to play this bottom notes to the first part. Anything's achievable if it's worthwhile. It was, I think it's one of the best modern pieces I've ever played.
So I guess the question has to arise in this room, because obviously, from speaking to all of you, it's not been a rare instance where stuff has been written where it's really kind of stupid, right?
But even in the normal symphonic repertoire, sometimes we have to stick, extra cardboard holes at the end of the flute to get a note that doesn't exist.
Right.
Or very often composers write piccolo into low C, they've written with it. And it's a really important solo, and you have to put an extension, but it means that the lowest note, which on the piccolo would be a D, on the flute C, becomes that note. So the other note is missing. So if they've written a scale passage down to that lowest note, you can't do it. It's impossible.
In the last 15 years, I guess a lot of composers, young composers, are composing on computers. And have you noticed that in a lot of the stuff that you get, in the sense, because I noticed that with my students now, I'm writing a copy, they write a lot of stuff that first of all looks awful, and secondly is often, like there's no breath for the wind players, because the computer can pretty much play anything. So have you noticed that? Have you noticed a more kind of? I think I noticed in a lot of young composers writing these is kind of more motoric kind of thing a lot, where it seems to be almost about process rather than narrative. You know what I mean? That it seems to be about the process of both, which to me kind of strikes me as being composition that's related to the study of computers as well as the study of music. Have you noticed that in
I just think composers are incredibly idealistic in a great way, and I love them for that. I mean, if you look back at Bach, there was nowhere to breathe. For if you play a wind instrument. So. If it really comes to it actually gets to the point where you feel guilty for having to take a breath. Because yes, occasionally you might get a bit annoyed, for God's sake, we're not overpowered by wind. But yeah, all in all, again, it's all we're so conditioned to try and achieve what's on that page.
Yes.
That it would be really useful if we felt more that we could actually approach the composer in advance and say, look. Because some composers are very open to it, but in all the years we can do these concerts, only once has a composer come to me and said, is there anything not right?
Well, I say on camera now that I'm totally open.
This is well ahead of this.
I'm totally open to the suggestion of changing something if it's easy to read. I mean, in general, I think sometimes I'm maybe a bit overcautious, but I've always been open to that idea. It makes no sense. Why would you say, it can't be written like that if it's played better? But in the end, the result has to be the most important thing.
I think the other thing to think about as well is that sometimes people who think of an orchestra, as you said earlier, as this thing. It's not. It's lots of people making this thing. And the point is that, unless you've got, say, the harp or the piano, and everybody's a melodic instrument, and everybody's playing a single line, pretty much. So I think you've got to realise that the music's got to go this way. Even if the music you wanted to sound, very chord-like, to achieve that, you've got people doing one thing. So sometimes it just finds things get so angular, they become a little bit destructive almost.
Also, there's small little computers and listening to it back on the computer that you can take it to a speed that works very well on the computer, but actually physically, because you've got somebody playing. And everybody's going like, oh yeah, yours supposed to, and on the computer it sounds great, but physically in an orchestra doesn't work. So it's I guess it's only experience that says to somebody,
exactly, and I think
it doesn't work that way.
One thing I find really difficult to read, I'm not sure if it's Sibelius or Finale or which, but we have a lot of lead lines above the stave, and if we have, say, a whole line of them, you actually can't see where the stave, the top of the stave is, and then you start writing in.
You get to be dyslexic
If
for
it's
a while.
if they can, I don't know how you can't fix the thing.
I can.
If there could be a gap between the legend line on each note.
Oh yes, I know, I understand what you mean, because it
But
looks
very
like...
often composers just like the stage
Yeah, I think
10.
that's-
Yeah.
Well, in finale, that's lack of knowledge of spacing.
Oh, is it?
Command 4.
Sorry.
Command 4. Seriously, command 4.
But even the other thing you're saying, like, you know, if you're doing a Bach concerto, your cadenzas would be improvised.
Yeah.
You know, well, that goes on then. By the
Yeah.
time you come to the 20th century, all cadenzas are pretty much written down.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah.
So that was in the kind of orchestras was done.
And the composers are not showing up on the stage with you, saying, come on guys, we can do this. You at the back saying, come on guys, they're saying, come on guys, you can do this.
Absolutely.
I think once the composers have a bit of respect for us and respect the fact that we really want to do what they've written,
Yes.
then we're really happy
Yeah.
and we can approach each other and it's a really productive
Like
relationship.
it's more a colleague kind of thing rather
Yeah,
than
exactly.
hard
It's
work.
when maybe, I don't know, it's because we appear intimidating, but sometimes composers can come in and maybe sit right back and not say a word,
Yeah.
or be the opposite, be very confrontational. And
Yeah.
neither of those go down particularly
No.
well. It's just not very helpful.
Yeah.
So we're in the middle.
I remember that.
Yes.
I promised to be somewhere in the middle.
And the one I can't say, people pace around, go back,
Yeah.
up, sit down, back and forth, sit down.
Yeah.
We'll in control.
Yes, that's okay.
I'm really sorry. We really
No, that's okay.
Sorry.
Listen, thank you very much.
problem.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Yes.
Thank
We have to
you.
practice.